good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to the Radiant Menopause podcast with me, Dr. Jill Barham. Today's guest in my In Conversation on the Radiant Menopause podcast is my friend and colleague Emma Guy. She is an acupuncturist and a holistic therapist. She has the most extraordinary story to tell us about her own experience with the menopause following her treatment for breast cancer in her early 40s. We're going to be talking largely about that today, although because we work in the same space, we do talk generally about the menopause and about how society views it and how women are largely still uneducated about it. But this episode I really wanted to be a very specific one about Emma's own experience, so I hope you enjoy it. Welcome. Here we are then. So this is the lovely Emma Guy. How are you, my lovely girl?
I am very good, thank you. How are you?
I'm very good. And you have had, a bit like me, the most interesting of times over lockdown, haven't you?
Absolutely, yeah. It's really made me focus in on some of the experience, I think, over the last 9 years as an acupuncturist. So definitely, and with yourself as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's really fascinating about this is that we've been reviewing our future businesses and what we want to do. I mean, obviously you are a therapist, a hands-on therapist, so you have not been able to treat anybody, and fortunately now you're back. We are the 5th of July, so you're opening up your therapy centre again.
Yeah.
But, like a lot of people, you've had to rethink, look at other ways that you could help your existing clients and potential clients, haven't you?
Yeah, and going back to that focus as well, it made me realise that because I'm an acupuncturist and I couldn't help anybody and the clinic was closed, how could I then use acupuncture or acupressure with people online? So I did a lot of online sessions. I was involved in 3 different groups which had around about 30,000 people in those groups, where every day I uploaded an acupressure point to help with, say, lower back or headaches or whatever the case may be. And then one of the days I was feeling quite low, really, because I think that it's the worth, what I give as an acupuncturist to my patients. That's the bit that I was missing the most, and I was like, I really wanted to help people personally. And I woke up the next morning and I thought, I need to do something different. I need to reinvent something that happens online. And one of the things I'm doing at the moment is I'm writing a book on the menopause and how acupuncture and my protocol can help in the menopause. And I had a bit of a writer's block, and maybe you've had those in the past when you've been writing your books.
Well, actually, once I get down to it, it just kind of flows. But I do know that a lot of people do suffer with writer's block, definitely. But I've also been witnessing that, this has given you the opportunity to really rethink your direction, like mine. And I think that's what's made the difference, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So within my book, I have the experience and the 9 years experience of treating menopausal ladies. And I realised when I worked it out on number-wise, I've treated over 1,000 ladies going through the menopause. And I've had 6 years, not only in the private clinic, but also I've had 6 years experience in the hospice environment as well. And most of my patients in the hospice environment have gone through breast cancer and therefore put into early menopause, or surgically menopause, as they call it.
Yeah.
So I came up with the Menopausal Godmother, and I wanted this character, this person, to be fun but also relatable, that's somebody you would trust, someone that you would go to. And I think we've all got godmothers or godparents in our families, and they're kind of independent people, so they're not families and they're not family members or friends. They're people who you would go to ask for independent advice. So the
wise women.
Yes, well, yes, absolutely, yes. And that's the bit that really hooked me, to the point where it was really relatable. But I've been a surveillance camera for the last couple of years in some of the menopause groups, and to be honest, they're very, very negative, and they can bring you down. And I thought, well, how do I kind of change that in that marketplace? So the menopausal godmother is going through a transition at the moment, that it will be an online space where you will have access to 3 separate areas, and that is, one area will be other godmothers. So online you'll have people like nutritionalists, acupuncturists, hypnotherapy, so there'll be a safe space for other godmothers, but also there'll be a safe space for ladies who can go to and access some of that other godmothers' knowledge. And then the third part is, which is very exciting, I've had lots and lots of really good conversations over the last few weeks with products, so menopausal products.
Yeah, very good. And actually, I've got a bit of a secret to tell everybody, because, you know, one of the ways, well, the way that this actually came about, I hope you don't mind me sharing this.
No.
Because I decided that, much like you, during COVID, that I really needed to start owning the space of menopause, because although I've been working as a functional nutritionist and a holistic health coach for several years, I was kind of, you know, because I can help everybody, I wasn't being as specific as I should have been about who really the large client base that I have and who I wanted to target. And actually they are menopausal women, because guess what? You know, I'm a menopausal woman. And so actually we were having conversations, and you were helping me, because I was forming this podcast, and I was saying, I want this podcast to be positive, and all the things that you've said, I want it to reflect the positive sides of being a midlife woman, a wise woman, a godmother. And you said to me, why don't you use the godmother term? And it just didn't resonate with me personally.
Yeah.
And then you said, actually, do you know what? I'm just going to use that myself.
Doesn't that quite often happen when you're trying to kind of, you know, get your area, and you start talking to others, and it's normally a spark that sparks off something else, isn't it?
Yeah. And that's, I think, what being a wise woman, being a godmother, being a grandmother in the grandmother sense, or a crone in the maiden, you know, woman crone kind of scenario, is that we have the ability now to be able to collaborate like this. I think this is very much more obvious during COVID as well, but also that, you know, as I've got older, and I know that you will be the same, is that ego gets completely out of the way, and that, you know, you are very happy for me to occupy the same space as you, as am I for you, because, you know, we can't do this alone. We have to do this as a community. There are lots of, well, not enough, but there are other women that are providing help for, let's face it, half of the population in the world, which are women, that if aren't in menopause now, they will be at some time. So this is a big thing that we need to be able to, you know, to educate more women on. So actually it's about collaboration. And this is the thing about being the godmother at this age, is that there is no kind of, well, I own that, you know, I'm in competition with you. And that's really the kind of ethos that we both want to share, isn't it?
Yeah. When I first qualified, when I first went to an acupuncturist when I was poorly with ulcerative colitis, which is where I started kind of falling in love with acupuncture, the acupuncturist at the time said to me, there's room for us all in this world. And I've really taken that on board, because I do believe that there is room for all of us, whether we are sharing the same space.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think increasingly, because of what's happened with COVID, is that, you know, I have two very good friends, you and my lovely friend Sally Varley, who is also an acupuncturist. She is also a specialist in menopause, but she's also a fertility specialist, as are you. Yeah. You both do very similar things. You're both very different. You both live in very different parts of the country, but actually you're both owning the space now online, and that actually there's not only room for both of you, but you've also done a little bit of collaboration as well, haven't you?
Yeah, and that's via you, so thank you for the introduction. And we've been following each other probably for about a year or so, maybe a little bit longer. And when we collaborated together last week, we had a general conversation about fertility and menopause. And you know, in my local area, I'm known as the baby maker. So, but I'm also known as the menopausal godmother now. So, and the similarities in some of the points that we would use in acupuncture terms actually work in fertility and also work in menopause as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, that makes absolute sense to me. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is, because, you know, obviously we could go down a big hole talking about acupuncture and treatment for menopause and fertility for that matter, because of course, if we've got our listeners, you know, perhaps 40 and above, we now know that more women are having babies over 40 than they are under 20. So fertility for the over 40s is a big issue. We know that 25% of infertility is actually unexplained, and those are actually usually the people that you get to see, aren't they? Because there's no kind of formal treatment for it. So rather than go down that big hole, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a special episode of you and Sally's conversation, if that's okay with you.
Yes, of course.
So that our, you know, as a segue to this, people are going to be able to listen to you having this really in-depth conversation, two fertility and menopause experts, having the conversation about how you as acupuncturists can actually help. And of course, Sally's also works in my field. You know, she's part of the team that I have with a brand, Synergy Worldwide, that I use, and she's very interested in nutrition as well. So I'm sure, you know, some of that came in too. This holistic approach is really, really important. So we're going to park it, if you don't mind, because I also really want to cover with you your own specific journey.
Yeah.
So I think we probably need to start. Well, how old are you now, Emma?
I'm 51.
Okay. So can you describe to us a little bit about how you have experienced the menopause and actually what happened to you, which was something that a lot of women who are going to be listening here will definitely relate to.
Yes, in my early 40s, I started to experience some of the perimenopausal symptoms, but I never really attributed it to the perimenopausal area. I think because there wasn't enough knowledge out there, and I think there's a lot more knowledge now. But I was working at St Luke's Hospice, where I used to run an acupuncture clinic, and I'd been treated. I've had 6 years of experience in treating breast cancer patients, and I found a lump on my right breast, and I instinctively knew what to expect because I treated now today over 1,000 ladies going through the menopause, but at that time I treated hundreds and hundreds of ladies. So I came home and I wrote a mind map, and I broke it down to the lump in the middle and all the expectations of what the possible outcomes were, even to the point where and I'm quite detailed and planned, that I sat and wrote my funeral plan as well, because I just thought, well, if it's worst case scenario, then I want to make sure that that's all in place. So I was diagnosed, yes, with breast cancer. I knew it was, and I had mastectomy and reconstruction at the same time in 2016. Sorry, it does feel raw sometimes to talk about it, so please, if you're listening, bear with me. So at that
Can
step.
I just ask you then, because now they're talking more and more about the fact that there are less mastectomies happening, and that actually lumpectomies for the majority of women are the kind of route. How was that put to you?
Um, Again, my experience, I call it fortunate experience because of treating all those ladies after breast cancer. I instinctively wanted a mastectomy, and the hospital actually that I went to was my local hospital, and they had measured the lump at 2.7 centimeters. But instinctively, it was that gut feeling. I thought, no, I want a mastectomy. They were pushing me down the lumpectomy route, and I thought, no, I want a mastectomy. And I knew that the Genesis Centre, it's now called Predict Prevent Breast Cancer, over in Wythenshawe in Manchester. I knew that was the best place to go to, so I asked for a referral there. And cut a long story short, when I got my results, it was 5.7 centimetres, and my consultant said, you were right to ask for a mastectomy. So I suppose that was my inner voice saying, this is what you need to do.
That's really important. We just need to dwell on that a little bit, Emma, because what we see as holistic therapists, and we talked about this. We talked about this recently in sort of little private conversations, is that women and men actually, but let's talk about women, rely so much on the expertise of their GP or their consultant, and actually hand over their health and the responsibility for their health very often to the experts, without actually tuning into their gut reaction, tuning into their intuition. And I get it, because I understand that this is a big responsibility to make those decisions for ourselves. But one of the things that we want to be able to do with the work that you do and I do is the more that we can educate women, the more we can empower them to make those decisions that are right for them and that aren't a blanket approach, that helps them to really trust in themselves. It's a bit like, you've got children as well. You take your child to the doctor because you're really worried, and they go, oh no, it's nothing. I wouldn't have been at the doctor's if I thought it was nothing. Particularly as an ex-nurse, we're notoriously bad. You go, oh yeah, you'll be fine. What do you mean you've fallen over? What do you mean you've got to be cold? No, that would be fine. We're the very worst. If I'm at the doctor's, it's because there's something serious going on here. So it's, I think it's really important that we get that message across and say it's okay to have your own opinions as long as you go with some sort of informed choice. So, I really applaud you for that.
No, and do you know what? I even before I had my mastectomy, I used to talk a lot to the patients about being informed, asking the questions, bringing somebody independent with you when you are going for test results, because I did in my heart know, but I hoped it wouldn't be. But as soon as they said yes, it's breast cancer, the advert that they have, I mean, everything just literally, I just literally fell out. It was kind of like boom, and every word afterwards, I couldn't remember, and thankfully I had Jonathan with me, my husband, and he was wonderful, because he's saying, no, he said this, he said that, he said it's okay, and my breast cancer was all within the milk duct, so it hadn't actually become invasive, and therefore hadn't come to inside the breast tissue. So after the mastectomy and reconstruction, I had one sentinel lymph node removed, and there was nothing in the lymph node. So so my breast consultant, and I call him Boy Wonder, by the way, Mr. James Harvey, he is wonderful. He just said, right, that's it, off you go, you're done. And I was like, what about chemo? No, you don't need chemo. What about radio? No, you don't need radio. What about HRT, tamoxifen or something like that? And he went, no, go home, you're done, and I was like, if that could have been the best outcome, it absolutely was. And I talk a lot to my patients now, even I work at the Hospice of the Good Shepherd in Chester, and I also obviously still got the private clinic, but I talk a lot to the ladies about, right, okay, and I even show them my mind map. I say, right, here's what to expect, if the answer is this or that or whatever the case may be. But also in the private clinic, when we're talking about the menopause, my menopause and well, literally as I woke up from the mastectomy, I was plunged into a menopause, and they call it surgical menopause. Now, in natural menopause, everything naturally starts to dip. In surgical menopause, it falls off a cliff literally overnight.
Yeah, so for me it was similar, because I had a hysterectomy for a big fibroid when I was 45, and although they left my ovaries, that massively sped everything up. I was already showing menopausal symptoms, by the way, and they'd done an internal ultrasound and actually had looked at my ovaries and said, oh, there's nothing much going on here, and I was 44 at the time, and thinking, wow, gosh, that's really unusual. But of course, now you and I know that if the average age of menopause is 51, that yes, the majority of women will be experiencing a drop in ovarian activity in their 40s. So I wasn't actually unusual at all. But that kind of moment of going into that dramatic effect of the, this, as you explain it, this sort of surgical menopause, for some women is really, really powerful, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it was.
Can I ask you, did they warn you that this might happen?
No. No. There was no real. What's the word I'm looking? I wouldn't say aftercare, but because the aftercare was amazing. The centre itself is absolutely amazing, and the nurses are absolutely amazing as well, especially Joyce, bless her. But there was no information to say, actually, before we do this might happen, and therefore the symptoms may happen overnight. And I probably, it was about 2 or 3 days when my hot flushes started to come, literally, and the moods of really low and deep, almost depression moods, to really high, to back down again. It literally did just happen overnight.
And it must have been really confusing, because of course, you've just had major surgery, there's all the image stuff that goes on with it. It would be usual for you to feel some sort of loss and depression and mood swings. And actually, I'm sure that a lot of women will come out of it not realizing that actually that the menopause, surgical menopause, is even a thing, and just attribute all of those to the actual trauma of having that surgery.
Yeah, and I think it's a loss of something, and it's almost like a grieving process. I look at it as the grieving process, and funny enough, I'm just writing my last chapter on my book, and I'm writing about acceptance, and I talk a lot to my patients that about for me, acceptance is the Hotel California part. And if you know the song, which I'm sure you do, part of the song says, you can check in, but you can never leave. And, my cancer story is a Hotel California moment, that I've checked into this membership. I'm a member now. I can't change it. So therefore, do you know what? I'm going to book myself into the presidential suite. I'm going to have the most expensive bottle of wine from the bar. I'm going to eat canopies or, oysters or whatever the case may be, because if I'm in Hotel California, I want to have the best.
Yeah. And that's really what your, whole speech focuses, and my focus is, because we're the same thing. We're, as you say, we've been watching what's been going on and looking at all this desperation of women who, I can't understand even now. And I know it's because I work in the space, but even now, every day, there are at least 5 women who say, I have, I don't know, dry skin. Is this a menopause symptom? I have digestive problems and bloating. Is this something to do with the menopause? I have, mood swings or whatever. Is this to do with the menopause? Oh my God.
Yeah. Do you know, when I was doing some research on the book as well to kind of go through the symptoms, and they say, oh, there's 30 odd symptoms, but actually there's more.
Yeah.
There's probably about 100 symptoms, and one of the most unusual the most unusual one that I found was big floppy feet, and your feet change in the menopause. And I thought, that's the reason why none of my shoes fit me anymore. So like eureka moment.
Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it? And when, hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? When I ended up at the doctor's at 51, in a very, very low state, basically fat, sick and unhappy, nobody mentioned to me anything about the menopause whatsoever. But in hindsight, when I look back, and the majority of the symptoms I have experienced at some point or another, and still have them. Actually, I didn't realize until you start doing your research, weird things, as you say, floppy feet, tinnitus, the fact that I developed a kind of an eye issue, which they thought was a detached retina, but actually is where the eye shrinks and you get this kind of flashing. The brain eventually gets used to it, but even so, now on a dark night I still see this flashing, because I went on to develop and now to treat vaginal atrophy, because everything is shrinking, everything is atrophying, everything is drying up.
Yeah.
And it's not really until you understand the effects of this withdrawal of estrogen that things start to, I see. So I'm, my circulation's not as good. The neural pathways are not as good. I'm not getting enough nutrients to the skin and to the various organs, but everything is affected by this withdrawal in estrogen.
And from a traditional Chinese medicine point of view, from an acupuncture point, the spleen is the transformer and transports things, but the spleen meridian actually is what we kind of call it the hormonal meridian. So therefore we would use spleen points to actually help the spleen to transform and transport things. And then when you're going through the menopause, if things are not being transformed and transported to the right areas, then that's where you start to get the dryness, and everything starts to then develop into the other symptoms of menopause.
So when you came out and you started experiencing all these extraordinary and unpleasant symptoms, what did you do? What happened?
Well, I had devised a protocol which I call the Guy protocol, because I've got to make myself famous for something. And I'd been using it for many years, and part of my book actually has some of the evidence and the research from the hospice, which is, in principle, they've allowed me to use that because it's all very independent. I'm not involved in it at all. So I knew the protocol would work. So I started using the Guy protocol, and that actually does help with the night sweats, as well as sleep, because if you have a sweat in the middle of the night, it wakes you. Therefore, it disturbs your sleep. If you're disturbed with sleep, guess what happens? You're tired, yes, and therefore you get fatigue, and then throughout the day you get, it just has a domino effect, doesn't it? So I use acupuncture. I do go to see another acupuncturist, and also I use a blend of treatments. I talk a lot to my patients, especially in menopause, about blending treatments. So find a recipe that suits you. So, for example, I use acupuncture, reflexology, Reiki, massage, facials, chiropractor, but in different stages, that I think, well, that's the blends that help me get me through the menopause.
Yes, but presumably was it ever suggested to you that you went on to hormone replacement therapy?
No, I wasn't allowed to because my breast cancer was
Estrogen.
hormone, yeah.
But what's really interesting about that, and because I've been doing a lot of research about it, because I've, when I came out of my hysterectomy, I was given hormonal patches. So it's quite enlightening, really, because this is a good 14 years ago. But then in those days, HRT was much more freely given until the big kind of scares. There was a scare before that in 2002 when the WHI report came out, put a lot of women off.
Yeah.
And it had a little bit of a resurgence. Then there was another scare a couple of years, I think, after I was on HRT. So I came off it because it was all to do with breast cancer. And have survived, but not really thrived, to be honest with you, without any estrogen, and I don't need to take progesterone all these years. And some of the listeners will have listened to some of the first episodes where I talk more about my own personal journey, and the fact that it's only really a few months ago that when I began to research estrogen and progesterone and HRT, that I realized that actually, particularly with books like Estrogen Matters by and there's an episode that I talk about it, Dr. Avram, I can't remember his name. Just let me look that up, because that's really important that I do that. Just been talking about it. Where is it? It's on my vaginal atrophy page. Sorry, wait a minute. Put this in. All right. Yeah, so there's one particular book called Estrogen Matters, which is written by a guy called Dr. Avram Blooming and Carol Travis, actually. And what's really interesting about that, I'd begun to really realise that not everything that we read is true, not everything that we are told is true, even by the experts.
Yeah.
And that actually, I'm not saying you should do this, but actually the blanket thing of, I've had breast cancer, therefore I can't take HRT is not true. It might be true in your case. And I began to really understand the risks and benefits and the facts and myths around HRT, and the difference between the study that was done in 2002, the WHI study, and the fact that it was done on older women over 65, something like that, on a different form of estrogen, not the transdermal, estrogen that is either delivered through your skin or, in my case, through a pessary in the vagina, so directly through. So in other words, it doesn't go through the liver. And understanding that actually, for me, estrogen protects me. It's a beneficial thing for me because I don't have to have the progesterone, and that I'm much more likely to develop breast cancer 10 times or double the amount at least if I'm overweight than if I take a little bit of body identical HRT. So I began to really understand the withdrawal effects of estrogen, and looking at it, instead of medicalizing it, looking at it more in terms of a lack. And Dr. Louise Newson talks about this. She's reframed it and actually talks about the withdrawal of estrogen rather than as a menopause symptom, if you like. Yeah. And so I've got my head around it personally because I take magnesium and I take vitamin D and I take B vitamins every day and I take omegas every day to fill the gaps in as I'm getting older, and it's because our food's not as good. So what was my big problem all these years about actually taking some body identical or micronized HRT, and how was my chronic sleep issue going to affect my longevity? Yeah. Because actually, having not slept for 15 years, at one point me having hot flushes every half an hour, as you describe, that is really not good for my mental, emotional and physical well-being. Mm-hmm. And so I really did a massive review, and the thing that really, since I started taking HRT, was the discovery of this book as well, Estrogen Matters by this guy. So, but it is a very, very personal choice, but what we want to be able to do is to just reassure women that actually things have moved on, and that there is more and more information and studies and research. And the great thing about this book, you and I love research, don't we? We're really nosy about stuff. It's not just, I think this might work. This guy actually quotes research paper after research paper after research paper that actually prove his hypothesis, which is really, really important. Yeah. But, you know, at the end of the day, you know, there has to come a point at which we do trust those people that are instrumental in making us well or helping us to be well. But as you say, it's also going back to your gut instinct, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's one of the things I'm looking at the moment, because of you, really, that I'm thinking, well, actually, maybe there is an opportunity for me to take some kind of HRT, and it's arming ladies with that kind of knowledge as well, because if you research it and find it, and then you can go to your GP and say, right, this is what I want, you know, because it's, for me, it's about the knowledge to the to ladies out there, you know. I remember, I was, when you were talking about it, I remember being on a CPD, a continuous professional development course through the Royal Society of Medicine, and it was actually on breast cancers, and the statistics were as low as 1% more likely to get breast cancer if you're on HRT, and that was probably about 3.5-4 years ago. Yeah. And you just think, well, like you say, things have moved on, you know, there's so much more product development out there, you know. There's a I'm trying to remember the name of it, but there's like an oil capsule that has CBD oil in it. Apparently that's really good for hot flushes and symptoms in menopause, you know. So there's we need to stop spending time in the past and actually start researching about the future.
Yes, and what Dr. Avron says as well is that, which has really helped me to get where he's coming from, is that, you know, we know as holistic therapists that we're all living with cancer all the time. You know, and this will be a shock to people, but we have cancer in our bodies all the time. And, you know, our bodies, when they are in balance and in flow, are dealing with this free radical damage that's going on all the time. This is why we eat, you know, fruits and vegetables, because of the antioxidant benefits. When we are stressed, when we have, you know, past traumas, when we are in a vulnerable position for whatever reason, then that cancer gets out of control, basically. So we will have breast cancer sitting in the breast all the time, the majority of women. And there is a lot of evidence to say that there is a bit of over-treatment in some cases for breast cancers that would potentially never develop and never kill you. In the same way that men don't usually die of prostate cancer, they will die with prostate cancer because it's so slow growing. So it's not black and white, oh, I've got a tumour in my breast, therefore I need to have a lumpectomy or a mastectomy.
And that's really interesting, because when I was diagnosed with DCIS, which ductal carcinoma in situ. So it was all within the milk ducts. But my consultant reckoned it had been there for 15 or 20 years. And he couldn't say, apparently DCIS is 50-50. So either 50% it could break out and be really bad, or 50% that actually it'll just stay there and it'll be absolutely fine. So
what Dr. Avron was saying, though, is that actually what HRT does, it in his opinion and in all the research, it doesn't cause breast cancer, but that estrogen, which is a tiny amount for the majority of women, can potentially speed up the growth of that existing tumour. And actually that potentially could be a positive thing, because it shows and therefore it can be treated. It's a very different way of looking at things, and actually I think really reassuring too.
And I think, like I said, you know, we've got to forget about that scaring part that is really go and do your research and make sure that, you know, you are armed with that knowledge.
Your GP isn't either.
Sorry?
your GP isn't either, unfortunately.
No, and this is part of the research that I've been looking at, as you know, over the last year or so. That someone told me the other day. I've hooked up with some other godmothers, which is quite exciting, and she said that the GPs get. Is it half a day training or something like that?
It's a bit like their nutritional training. They get half a day training on nutrition. They get half a day training on menopause. Is not a disease.
No.
And we know that they have to learn so much. As a nurse, we had to learn enough. But particularly as a medic and coming out as a GP, they can't be all things to all people. But what does happen, and Dr. Louise Newson talks about this, is that even, you have to be quite bold, because even when you do know the facts and myths, and you are sure that HRT is safe for the majority of women, if you're getting directives out from the powers that be that you shouldn't be giving women HRT, or that they should come off it after 5 years, which is the bizarrest thing ever, we still see all the time, every day, I'm seeing posts of women saying, my doctor says it's time for me to come off. My doctor says it's time for me to halve it. They're having their symptoms treated, which are doing, really well, and they're being able to live their life. And all of a sudden, they're being told they have to withdraw from something which is essential for them. And it's fear and it's misinformation. And I know that somebody like Diane Danzebrink is doing a huge amount of work getting menopause talked about in schools, and also trying to get proper tutoring done for medics at medical school too.
Yeah, and again, via yourself, I've in the other business I'm involved in, which is Jonathan's business, a digital marketing agency, I've actually booked Diane in for one of her sessions in the employment in the workplace, and how to understand the menopause, and I've been watching her quite closely over the last few weeks as well. And what was interesting, when I started writing my book, I ordered a book which was called, do you remember the Haynes manuals? Like how to, make a Ford car, etc., or an engine, or whatever the case may be. There is one on menopause, and I had it on the table, and my teenager son, who's 14, he walked past me, and oh, right, yeah, menopause, know all about that. And I was like, what? And he was like, yeah, we learned it. We were learning it. We've learned it over the last few weeks at school. And I said, oh, right. I said, oh, I didn't know. And he said, oh, yeah. He said, it's part of the curriculum. And actually, it's because of Diane's work that he, in September, October last year, actually learned all about it. I've actually, it's been a real benefit, certainly in whilst we've been in lockdown, that there has been times when my hormone levels have gone up and down, and he's kind of like patted me and said, it's okay, Mom, I know it's not you, it's all right, and it's like, oh, okay, he gets it.
Yeah, that's amazing, isn't it? So when you had 2016, that's 4 years ago. So yeah. You've been thrown into this now for the last 4 years.
Yeah.
So what are your major symptoms then, apart from hot flushes? What are the other things? And mood swings, you've mentioned that. What are the things that are kind of getting in the way most for you?
I would say it's that domino effect. So if I managed to keep the hot sweats probably every 6 weeks or so with the acupuncture, but the protocol itself, it also helps with sleep. It helps with energy levels. It helps with focus and memory and all that kind of area as well. So I think those would be the two things that, the hot sweats and the moods of feeling elated sometimes, and then other times just feeling quite low. Yeah. And understand why, because there isn't anything to be low about. And then I think, and I know probably Jonathan, if you were to ask Jonathan, I think my fuse has become a very, very shorter. So I would flip and again, when that happens, Jonathan has a coping mechanism again, and it's probably because William sees him doing it. He says, look, I know it's not you, I'm going to walk away until everything's calmed down. So and
I am actually going to talk to Jonathan. Jonathan very kindly has agreed to be interviewed by me about your menopause and him dealing with it, because of course not only do we not talk about it as women and with parents and daughters, we definitely don't talk about it to men, and men don't talk about it to each other. So I think, that's a really important piece that I want to be able to do in this podcast too.
Yeah, and one of the chapters that I've in the book I've kind of topped and tailed is Jonathan, is his story about me going through the menopause, but I've got two other gentlemen's stories as well, from completely different perspectives.
Well, maybe we can persuade them to come on as two and
yeah, I'm sure they would do. I'm sure they would. And he wrote that chapter without me reading it, and a couple of weeks ago he said, right, the chapter's ready to go, I want you to read it now. And
was it
was my book editor, actually, it was I think it was quite cathartic, because we both got emotional, and that was in a nice way, because I got to see his side of what was going on. But my book editor, she said to me, actually, his story is like a love letter to you. Yeah. And when I told him that, he burst out into tears again. He was like, oh, right, that's exactly how I wanted it to come across. I didn't want it to be upset,
What have you called your book?
The Menopausal Godmother.
Right, good. It wasn't called that though until recently.
No, it wasn't. So we were talking earlier about the writer's block, and when I got this eureka moment with yourself, I thought, I know exactly what the book looks like now, and I'm literally within the last 6 weeks, I've rewritten the book from the beginning, and I'm on the last chapter.
Yeah, I was talking to a mentor friend of mine who actually I do a wonderful interview with. Her name's Dr. Marion Bevington, and she's part of my spiritual kind of world, one of my spiritual guides and mentors, but also runs a business called Find Your Why with Dr. Cheryl Chapman, who will also be interviewed. Yeah. And I was talking to her about how, and you will definitely relate to this, how when I defined my audience, even though I knew I was always talking to menopausal women, when I kind of came in and owned the space of menopause, I just feel so much more confident and natural about every bit of work that I put out there, whether it's a live video, a blog, an article on a magazine, a podcast episode, a video, whatever it might be. And she said, sometimes it's the same information. I'm not talking about anything else than I've never always known. All of this stuff I've always known, and it's in my book, but I've just repackaged it. It's just got a different ribbon. This is the way she described it. It's got a different ribbon on it. Yeah. And that different ribbon for me is the same as the different ribbon for you, is that it's given us the ability to just be more authentic, and I hate that word actually because it's overused, but just to be ourselves in the space that we want to hold for other women. And
you're absolutely right, because when I talked to Jonathan about the menopausal godmother and who is she? What does she look like? What does it, and he asked me a really good question, which was, why do people come to you in the menopause? What makes you different, or what makes you you? And I have a patient of mine that calls it the Emma-ness. She could go to any other acupuncturist, but she comes to me because it's the Emma-ness, and it's because I have that empathy of going through the menopause. I have the empathy of being through breast cancer, but also my space is a safe space, and I don't have any boundaries within that space. So I say, you tell me whatever you're thinking, because it's really important for me to understand where you're coming from, and therefore what treatment plan or what points will I use to help in the menopause.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, listen, I'm so grateful for, we always have amazing conversations.
Oh, thank you.
So you've already kind of, just to finish up the interview, I've got a couple of kind of quick fire things really that I wanted to cover with you. You've mentioned your Guy protocol. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you was, what is if you were to have, if you're having a bit of a meltdown and you think, I just need to pamper myself with something or treat myself with something, what's your favorite thing to go to? What would you have without lockdown, assuming everything is
do you know what I really love? I love a spa day. Because
on your own or with somebody else?
Normally take Jonathan with me, and the reason why we love our spa days is because it actually gets us to switch off. And we're away from everything. I mean, we have a wonderful little holiday home over in Conway in North Wales.
Oh yeah. I love Conway.
And that's we call it our escape hatch. So it's wonderful. But I think if you take yourself away from everything, that's really important. So things like, certainly even in lockdown, one of the things that certainly helped me was, let's go for our 10,000 steps today. And, which way shall we go? Left or right today, or straight on? Yeah. And we found some amazing parks and...
Oh, me too.
Oh, amazing.
Absolutely. Because our local walks that we were doing in the forest here have been shut down.
Right.
So we're forced to go and find other walks. And it's been the most amazing experience.
It's reconnecting with, nature again. The birds you can hear the birds so much more because there's no planes flying over. It just I think it's the tip would be, take some time out, and if that is just literally walking across to your local park, or if that is going on a spa day, or taking yourself on a nice for example, a nice narrowboat.
Yeah, we are very fortunate to have our narrowboat, I have to say. And as you've you're 51 now, so what would you say is your biggest win being in this, what we call a midlife woman? And I know that a lot of women who are listening are going to go, I don't want to be called a midlife woman, but let's own it. We are wise women, we are godmothers. What's your biggest win? What is the thing that you're really enjoying about being in your 50s?
There's a country song, and you might know this one as well. Its headline is "My Give a Damn's Busted." And you know what? I really, I've always been, I would say, a sensitive soul. Always a bit of a, yes, I'll do that for you, and I haven't really changed. But if something that's happened to me, and I think, the other day someone said to me, oh, why did you post that? That could have gone one way or another. And I just thought, whatever. So I think the biggest thing that helps me is, do you know what? I'm 51. I've got to get on with the rest of my life. I can't worry and think about what other people think. It's my life. It's my journey. And, I'm not looking for
validation.
Yeah, thank you for the word. Yeah. I'm not looking for that anymore. So,
very similar story. Why I laughed is because it's me as well. And, I'm 59. And so that just gets better, I have to say.
Right.
I've always known, and people have given you the kind of, it's none of your business what other people think of you. And you can hear that. But actually, I live that more as I get older as well. When we can't be all things to all people. We are people pleasers because we're healers.
Yeah.
At the end of the day. So it's very easy for us to be used and abused, and for us to feel very sensitive about, what we come from. We come from a big heart space, and we just want to do good. And when our intentions are misrepresented or misunderstood, we can feel really bad, can't we?
Yeah.
But actually, it's what I've learned particularly in my spiritual awakening journey, is that has nothing to do with me. It's their shit. You know, what they think about me is usually a reflection of what is going on in their lives, and I thank them for showing that to me, because actually there'll always be a part of me that is reflecting that back. And so every time that happens, there's a little bit of inner healing that does for me as well. Brilliant. And so finally, what are you looking forward to most about, you know, the next half of your life?
Do you know what? I'm really looking forward to seeing how the children grow. I have 2 other stepchildren who are 22 and 24, and just to see them grow. They were 5 and 7 when I first met them, and I love them just as if they're my own. So just to see William grow up, I think there's a opportunity which I keep pushing, and I think the door is now open with Jonathan, where we can spend more time together, perhaps take more of a back seat in both of the businesses. We love to go, we're not big walkers, but we do love to go out and do walks. John likes to watch, is a bit of a twitcher, likes the birds. As you know, behind me, all the stamps. He's been a stamp collector since he was a child. So what's the best things I'm looking forward to is just spending more time with the family.
Yeah, lovely. Well, thank you very much. Everybody needs to listen out for the episode between you and lovely Sally. Acupuncture That Works is your business. We're going to put in here, people can connect with you via Facebook, presumably. Any other ways? I'm going to put your web links on here as well. Where else can they find you?
I am everywhere on socials. I've got YouTube, I've got Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Obviously the website as well. Anybody can get me on.
So I'll put all this in the show notes and make sure that you know, everything that goes out will mean that. And where are you based, Emma? Just remind everybody where you actually are if they want an acupuncture treatment.
Yeah, the clinic is in Northwich in Cheshire, so we're not a million miles away from Manchester area, Manchester Airport. We kind of sit in the middle. Northwich sits in the middle of Manchester, Liverpool and Chester. So there's lots of commuting, M6, M56 around that area as well.
You're easy to get to, certainly. Thank you very much for today. And as usual, you know, we always have an amazing chat, don't we? Yeah. Please, if you're listening, make sure that you subscribe to the Radiant Menopause podcast, and that you share episodes so that we can get more of this information, this valuable information out, and support that Emma has shared with us today. And we'll see you the next time on the podcast.